So just overall, thanks everyone for being here and taking time to join another Zoom call. I know I've heard a lot about Zoom fatigue lately, so really do appreciate that, especially on a day like today. The goal here is to have this webinar on business planning for aquaculture along with risk management, how they work together, how they're separate, so on and so forth. And this all was brought in partnership with both Focus Maine, but also with NRMI, which I have spelled on a future slide because I always mess up that acronym, and the USDA Rural Business Development. So this webinar overall is going to include an overview of aquaculture business planning. So what does it look like in terms of both the narrative and the financial side of it? It'll explore a little bit about risk management, looking at crop insurance as well, and how these all tie together as planning overall for your farm. And then last, we'll go over some resources, some tools, and some options available. So some different things we've come up with at the association and that Paul Russel, who will be speaking, has come up with as well. And some things Sebastian has done too. Really just try to give you everything there to make your life easier as a farmer and try to help you build up some resiliency to your business, especially in these trying times. This webinar is being recorded. I know there's pretty limited interaction, unfortunately, the way Zoom sets it up. But if anyone has an issue with that, please let me know. And this aquaculture in this context is looking at specifically shellfish and seaweed. So oysters, mussels, scallops, and seaweed is the stuff I'll be talking about at least, and what we've been working on mostly at the association in this specific context. But I know Paul's been doing a bunch of work beyond that scope as well, so I'll let him detail on that. And yeah, overall just looking to work on farm and business risk management and crop insurance again as a part of this as well. So overall, I guess at this point I'll turn it over to Sebastian to just look at, he's been working on this for a long time, has a lot of experience in both the hands-on, farm industry side of this, but also from the association perspective, looking at overall risk management and business, and especially a lot of production planning too, which is another very important part of this. But Sebastian, I'll turn it over to you to explain the relevance of all of this work.
Sure. Well, thank you, Christian, and welcome everybody. And as Christian alluded to, this is being recorded, and we'll make sure that the recording gets out to a broader audience as well. I want to just make some very brief comments to put this in context. It's very clear to us at the association in talking to our growers that there have been some pretty dramatic changes in markets in the seafood sector. And certainly our shellfish growers have been impacted, I think, most of all. We've seen changes both in levels of demand as a result of COVID, as well as changes in distribution and supply chains. And those are impacting, number one, how people do business, and number two, what their potential revenue sources are and revenue levels are. And it's not clear yet what's going to happen if we return back to the new normal, if you will. Will those changes be sustainable over time in distribution channels? Will price points go back to their normal levels? Will they stay where they are as a result of COVID? And will consumption patterns change fundamentally or not? We just don't know. It's too early to tell. I think the other thing that's really important, at least here in Maine, and it's certainly true in some other states, is that a significant portion of the sector is in early stage startup. That is to say that they haven't been in business all that long. And as a result of that, their financial reserves are much smaller or thinner than a more established grower. And that means that they are more at risk in this current situation. In other words, when markets are changing, prices are changing, demand is changing, they may be less able to weather a down period, either from a price point of view, a revenue point of view, or from a market point of view. And those two things combined, the fact that we're seeing these changes in the markets and the fact that we have a significant number of growers that are in the early stages of startup, means that the sector as a whole is at quite a significant risk level. And so what we have focused on here at the association, in cooperation with a number of other groups, is trying to develop tools that allow growers to either manage their businesses better or to manage the risks associated with their business. And aquaculture is inherently a risky exercise because, in particular, the length of time for production cycles and the fact that you're growing living animals or plants. And so there's always a risk when you're dealing with living animals and plants that you lose them at some point in your growth cycle. And the longer your growth cycle is, the more risk you have. So risk management tools are really important. Those business planning, production planning, and risk management tools are tools that our land-based colleagues in agriculture have been using for many years. And so really what we have tried to do at the association is take many of the tools that are used in traditional agriculture and adapt them to aquaculture to give you as growers better ways to bet hedge in risky situations, better ways to increase your gross revenues or your net revenues, better ways to use tools to predict how your business will do if you change your strategy in the face of changing distribution channels or supply lines even. So that's why we've been working on this stuff. It is the first time that I know of where there's been a collective effort by a growers association to bring a suite of tools to bear for the sector, at least in the US. We're going to focus over the next year on rolling them out and getting people as coached up as we possibly can to use them. And that's really what a lot of Christian's work will be focused on. So I'm going to stop there. That's the reason that we think these business tools are important. The risk management tools are important. And I really look forward to hearing from Christian and Paul today on their presentations and a little bit of an explanation of the different tools and how they may be used. So thanks, Christian.
All right, thank you, Sebastian. I'm just gonna pull up a little slideshow right here to go along with this all. That's the first slide we're already staring at anyways, but one moment. Sorry, is that's not full screen, is it?
No, there it is.
Now it is? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, my apologies for that. So yeah, thank you for setting that all up, Sebastian. So again, everything we're looking at here is this whole theme of aquaculture business planning and risk management, and really looking at it from the grower on the farm perspective. And just to keep it at the highest level here, you know, what is this idea of business planning? And it's something, I know it sounds super simple, but I've found people getting tripped up over it. And the idea is just a detailed way to really lay out a plan showing how you're going to take this idea you have, you know, say it's, I really want to move to Maine and start farming oysters or start farming mussels. Great, that's awesome. How are you going to do that is just half the battle. And the other half is how are you going to turn that into actual money in your bank account? And again, this is all work that we're doing in partnership with all these organizations at the bottom. And Northeast Extension Risk Management Education, NERMI, is the one I could not say earlier because, again, I always mess it up. I'm sorry for that, Jake. But again, taking all this business planning, what this really moves into is looking at this in a COVID-specific context. And that's how a lot of this work came up. As Sebastian mentioned, with this whole industry in transition, businesses going from smaller scale or hobby farms to full-size operations, there's a big part of that as well, especially when these projects started a few years ago. And that's what some of the resources we'll be presenting today are. But a lot of this really has come up again, as you heard, is when you were logging on, this discussion of a COVID context and what businesses, specifically seafood and aquaculture, look like in this context. So the first thing to do here, and just to jump right into this, is looking at preparing a business plan. So, and there have been some other people talking about this as well. And again, we want to do this in more of a Maine context and specifically looking at aquaculture. As Sebastian said, things like this have been going on for farms for, I don't even know how long, both at a state, local, regional, national level. But the idea here is came from just the fact that a lot of people we've worked with who are incredibly smart and really quite successful in their businesses don't necessarily have a plan. It's pretty impressive, some of the numbers I've heard people remember without even having to look at the back of an envelope and just knowing them in their heads. But at a certain point too, most of them did acknowledge that either they had to make a business plan or they realized it was an issue. So, but before you even get there, the first thing is to really think it out. You know, what I have here is, what will you sell? Of course, you know, you have idea of a product, to whom, well, that could change. But also, what is it that you want from your business? You know, is this something you want to do part-time for fun because you like getting out on the water? Is it something you want to do to support a family? It's, you know, you have to come up with your business goals. I've heard some other speakers say that some people just say, what do you want? Well, I want to take a vacation because they were so caught up in it, they couldn't take a vacation for 10 or 20 years. But it's important to know your goals and your values, your capabilities as well. So in other words, do you have a boat like this you're already using for something else? What is, maybe you have a bad back that'll limit you from flipping oyster cages. These things are important. And really what it comes down to though is thinking it out is half the battle. And it's tough. And I understand people don't want to go through all those exercises often, but the most important part of this is really writing it down. And I understand completely that is not something people want to do. And it can be quite cumbersome, especially trying to get into a really detailed plan, but it is of crucial importance. And one, perhaps a cliche, but that I've heard that I enjoy is that if it's not going to work on paper, it's probably not going to work. And yes, that can suck, but it is very important to try to get through this step. And even if it's, 10, 20 minutes, I've heard some people say the difference they made from doing a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Just doing that, writing that down 10, 20 minutes during a coffee break during the day, how that could transform their business and identifying one area, either good or bad, that could really make or break their business. And when it comes down to it, still, even for hobby farmers, even if it's just something you want to do, like I said, to get out on the water, perhaps, you're gonna have to make money at some point, or you're just sinking money into this. And so it really does come down to having all your goals, your risks, and a plan down on paper or a computer. I mean, computer would probably be the recommended way at this point, especially in terms of saving yourself time and sharing it with other people. But the last thing to do here is to review and refine. So look over your plan. And this is that SWOT I mentioned just a minute ago, looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. So it's really important that even for a new plan, you do this right away, because once you have a little distance to remove yourself from, a lot more is going to start to pop out at you. But also it's really important to work with a business consultant or your business partners, but someone else, especially a professional or someone like, myself, Paul, or Sebastian, to look at a business plan and really try to help you troubleshoot this. And it's not for people to pick you apart, it's nothing personal. It's just making sure to really, again, here it's risk management and making sure that you didn't miss something, or that somebody doesn't have another great idea that could help you. Or perhaps, one thing in the leasing process, it kind of forces you to do a couple of these things, and maybe you miss something in there, or maybe that actually will help you. But this is all something, if you've already done it, that you should be doing every year, and really trying to identify especially your greatest weaknesses. And the most successful businesses even will do this annually, if not more, and make little adjustments that could quite literally make or break a business, especially in this context. And that's how, again, a lot of this is really coming to even more importance now. We're trying to reach out and meet with people because while typically this may be an annual thing, the way the spikes and the curves and everything have been going with COVID, this could be a monthly thing. 1 month restaurants are operating, 1 month they're limited capacity, 1 month they're not. So it's really tough to try to balance this all out. And this really looks at, this is more the narrative side. So this is just the first part of it. And we do have resources to address this. And but there's this whole financial and production side as well. So we understand that, especially for a lot of farmers, you get into farming because you like farming. You want to be out on the water, you want to be outside. You don't want to be behind a desk in an office, and I get that. But it's important to do this and take these steps so that you can make a business for yourself that will allow you to stay out there. As we were talking about some of these resources that are available. So this written plan is what we're just talking about. And this is, we do have a plan through MAA, a business plan narrative. And there are other similar ones, Ag Plan through the University of Minnesota, Fish Plan, also quite similar products really, and those are done online. This one through MAA we have as a Word document. They're pretty similar products really. But again, it's really there to help you outline what a business plan is, the written narrative. And this is something that becomes even more important when you're looking at things like financing or looking to have investors in your business, even partners, making sure you have something down that you can show other people so that you can go to them and they understand what you're doing, why you're doing, and how you're doing it. Along with this written plan in terms of resources, we do have a pretty significant list of resources available for COVID-19. You might have just heard, I'm not sure when you all logged on when we're discussing this, but looking at the CFAP2 program, for example, and providing different sources of funding for coronavirus relief in the time being. We also have created some risk management tools, which I'll get into later. And again, AgPlan was the University of Minnesota software that helps you to create a business plan. And this is another example of one way people have been doing this for a long time. And for them, it's been more traditional agriculture in the Midwest. But here we're trying to get aquaculture to begin moving through that business cycle and becoming more of a developed industry and making sure people have strong, resilient businesses, especially in these times. So the next part of this really looks at the business and the production planning. The production plan, and this is just a cover of it, it's a spreadsheet similar to the business planning one. The idea here is to project and track your production levels. So say in this case, you're a mussel farmer, making sure you have enough product to get through, say, the next 3 months, next 6 months. Yes, that's of course important, but also making sure with say a 2-year product like mussels could be, making sure that you're planning out 2 years. So are you going to hit your sales goals? What happens if you lose a raft? What happens if so on and so forth? To make sure that beyond even normal mortality, you're planning accordingly so that you will not be running out of mussels, which could run into a whole different slew of issues with dealers, suppliers, so on and so forth. So here again, yes, ensuring it's a sufficient product and making sure also it has some resources in there to help you plan out in terms of just the work schedule, making sure that everyone's doing what they need to at the right time. And the last thing here is looking at business plans. And these, we've created MAA over the past couple of years through a lot of work reaching out to growers, other organizations, making sure that these plans are specific to the Maine context. And that's one part that I did not include in the production planning. It was that the Maine context was what was so important here, and that this has been done in other areas of the US, but never quite on this scale and never for the aquaculture that we have in Maine, for example. So say oysters in Virginia or Louisiana may have a similar program, but it just hadn't been done given the growth cycles in Maine, where it makes such a huge difference, 2 to 3 times the growing to maturation often. So that was tied into both the production planning, and then that of course leads into business planning when you're looking at the costs of say an oyster over its lifespan. So these business plans offer the opportunity to get more to the financial side of business planning beyond the written and the production aspect of it. So what a lot of it does is take some pretty simple assumptions, which are not pictured on this page, but looking at some basic assumptions around labor, mortality, sales goals, things like that to try to help you. It then goes throughout the rest of the business plan and sets it up in a way that you have to do very minimal clicking and input just to make sure that things are lined up and that they make sense. So for example, monitoring your revenues and expenses. If you can see up top in this example, how the revenue would be there and comes down at the bottom. Well, actually profit is not here, but it'll come up as red, something that simple. And the idea here is to analyze and improve profitability among many other things. And just to show you those resources quickly. So these are things that and this is where Sebastian mentioned, we're talking about meeting with people. And the idea here is to meet with people to help set up these plans. So this, and I'll zoom out and I apologize if it's too small, feel free to let me know. I know it's kind of tough to read these numbers. These numbers are not any specific farm, by the way, it's just from some of the work we've done. This is what we can see, say, an average, smaller, earlier farm looking like. And so the idea here is just to give you the visual of what this production planning looks like. So, and this, again, fits all into this risk management overall, which is one component of it, but we'll let Paul get into that more a little bit. But as we mentioned, so it's based on some growth data we received from Maine. You can see this graph over here looking at how oysters will be growing over time. And then, try to scroll down slowly, looking at a production schedule. So really having a way to make sure that all of your oysters are going to be growing when you need them and in a method in which you'll be receiving them exactly at the right time. So we have some other tracking metrics over here, looking at, say, your inventory, your market size inventory, and your sales goals. And again, these are all just to make sure that based on things like your survival rate, up here we have, say, 70%, that you can calculate how much you're going to need to start your farm in this given year and to go from there on out. We also just had some very brief, simple things in here, as I mentioned, looking at this is a high level cash flow, just trying to figure out roughly, say, when money's going to come in, when money's going to go out, along with a calendar again, this was just, and this is something I found from my time working on a farm, not an aquaculture farm, just an agricultural farm. And, putting responsibility things, putting things on the board, the things people don't want to do that they're just going to put off unless they have a name next to it. And last, the monthly sales. In this case, you could call this, say, for its oysters here, it's almost like cash flow for oysters. It's the oyster flow, making sure that throughout the year you're going to have an adequate supply and that you're not going to be, having any suppliers getting angry at you, and that you can give a consistent product when applicable. It's not always. And so that's a production plan aspect of this. Again, it's really just planning out the growth of your farm. But also one important thing on here is this actual below. And this really just looks at focusing on what happened. Say this first year you're supposed to grow 15,000 oysters. Well, maybe it turns out only 5,000 of those came out. It's very likely, especially in earlier years, you're going to lose a lot of product. So it's important to look at this whole idea of projected versus actual to see not only what is it you're supposed to be doing, but how is it actually measuring up. And to get into the business planning, I'll pull that up. Now this plan, excuse me, is definitely a bit more in depth. And again, this gets more at the financial aspects of farming, which I know not everyone got into farming to work at the desk, but it's a necessary evil. And I guess if you stay on top of it, practice good record keeping, all those great things, it's not as evil as it may appear when you're collecting the back of envelopes and dumping shoeboxes on your desk, which we've all been there. But so the idea I mentioned is filling in these assumptions. So everything in blue on here, whether it's production assumptions, sales assumptions, labor assumptions, so on and so forth. The idea is you fill these out. And I know it probably looks like a lot up front, but with mostly just those things here on this page in blue, it will fill out the vast majority of the rest of your business plan. So again, the idea being how much do you think you want to sell? How much do you think you're going to have in terms of labor? How much are your fixed or your annual costs? And survival, price of seed. And I know I'm going through these things quickly, and the reason is just to give a very general overview. And again, I'm glad to talk with anyone about these after the fact, especially for growers. Very glad to follow up with a meeting. And production schedule, again, is at the bottom of here. That's the same thing as from the previous page, the previous production plan. Another aspect of this is, especially for early farmers, we want to make sure people have a way to see what it's going to look like to start a farm. And it's easy to say, oh, well, I already have this, or oh, well, I'm already doing this. Well, that doesn't really cost that much. I just won't count that. It's important they're all noted. And depreciation becomes a factor then as well, but I won't get into that. And this becomes a little more complicated for some other firms as well, or types of farms. For example, mussels or scallops, especially seaweed, where there are equipment that are being used for other things, whether it's a boat, but assigning the proper usage values of those can really be a crucial factor. So again, looking at the initial costs, startup fees, what is it someone's going to pay? That comes from that first sheet. And then filling this out, looking at different pieces of equipment, boats, skiffs, cages, so on and so forth, just to see what it's going to look like to set up this farm. And what this all does, briefly, is bring it into, in this context, an annual budget. So that gave you the startup cost, but mostly the things from the first sheet are going to give you this annual budget. And the reason I said the blue does so much is because everything in here has just been populated from what you put in terms of what you think costs will be, so on and so forth. So just to keep this very high level, again, you have your revenues up here, what you expect to plan or expect to be harvesting and selling. Say here, $10,000 in year 2. Well, just for the example here, here's your costs. All right, well, turns out this is set to year 1, no sales, so it's gonna come out, you're losing $11,000. And we did the same thing for 5 years out. And this is really just the same sheet, just we have now budgeted versus actual, as I mentioned. And this was something that I've seen myself as well, and I know Sebastian said was crucial, especially in his time managing different farms, looking at this idea of what should be happening and what is actually happening. But we also want to give some additional metrics such as, cost per oyster, where I'll slide over where we have some additional costs here. So for example, for this farmer, $7 cents per oyster is coming from seed. And this all works out, and we'll just see what this breaks down to in terms of the percentage of total cost as well. And we're doing this again for the budget and the actual. I know there's a lot going on here, but again, just giving you the idea, your operating costs overall, your overall fixed costs. In this case, they're losing a little over $1,000 in year one. And that's, or sorry, year two, and that's okay. Other things on here, extremely briefly, just cash flow, looking at cash flow with these same line items going through, which is absolutely crucial, especially around COVID. A sensitivity analysis, just to give you some other tools to see how when price and mortality fluctuate, revenues will fluctuate. So you can see a several $1,000 swing here based on the price and the mortality rates of the oysters. And last, a break-even analysis, and this is a tool that I find extremely interesting, in that based on your current cost structures, how many, in this case, oysters will you have to grow in order to make money? And in this case, 26,000 oysters. So for that farm, great. They know that they're going to need to scale up to that. And another part of all of this, and I'll jump out of this for a second, go back to this, is frozen. So again, looking at COVID in your business, and I'll come back to that in a second, because one thing I was just thinking about in terms of this business planning is the idea of benchmarking. So that's what a lot of those numbers came from in this. This was a project we worked on. And the idea here is this is something that's been done throughout many, many agricultural industries, dairy, potatoes in Maine, for example. And the idea is that it gives a strong picture of what the sector looks like overall, but also what, say, an average farm may look like, which then gives you as a farmer the advantage as well of seeing how you measure up compared to these different farms. So we have these available for oysters, mussels, scallops, and seaweed. And this is an infographic on the right, just taking a very high-level overview of these big takeaways from the benchmarking report. It's a very dense document, a lot of details in there, but for a farmer, it makes a lot of sense. There are tables in there with a lot of numbers that allow you to say, for example, what's my cost per oyster for labor? Well, you can then compare to what the industry averages are and see you may be higher or you may be lower. And you'll find that for different aspects across your farm. As we have in the bullet here, you're characterizing typical farm performance. And in this case, it's allowing you to look at the production, the cost, the profitability, the risk of your farm versus those of other farms, and really assessing your own performance. And so this is especially important when you're looking at either growing your farm or the early years of developing a farm and seeing, say, for example, what it may cost just to start up. How much will a mussel farm cost me per acre? Or looking at ways to expand. It really just helps to suss it out and inform both your own personal business development, but also this is a really important tool to use for lenders, because they then, when you come in with, say, a mussel farm or scallop farm application, they have something they can refer to and see what seems legitimate, what seems a bit far-fetched, and really what the balance is there. And again, where this all just ties into was this COVID slide. And we're looking at all of this now in a specific COVID context. So it adds, unfortunately, a bit of pressure and really importance and significance to business and production planning. Trying to ask, how have you prepared your business to weather the impacts from COVID? Have you created, oh no.
Have been what has happened here.
Sorry about that.
There he is. Okay.
I don't know how. Only seems when I'm presenting something that my internet cuts out. It's just a stroke of luck. But yes, looking at COVID, the context for business planning, and really just highlighting the importance of business planning with this, because so much is changing so quickly, and really those who have the ability to be the most flexible, the most rapidly adapting and responsive to COVID and planning for the future of it are going to be those who are the most successful. And the ability to flesh out the ideas of how to combat COVID and so on, to be able to do that on paper is really important, because while this is applicable in normal times too, if you make an error on paper and you realize that, or you have an idea that the errors are highlighted on paper, it's just on paper. It's not, oh, I'm gonna do this sort of oyster farming, and then you get all the gear in the water and realize it doesn't work where you are because of water depth issues, or say that's for mussel farming. So in this case, just really highlighting how in the times of COVID, trying to figure out what parts of your business are going to change, especially marketing, and how long are these changes sustainable. So this looks at things like cash flow. And again, without going into too much detail on these are things I would really be glad to just drill down into on a one-on-one meeting, as I mentioned, and we'll get more on that later. And I think I'm a little over what I was supposed to be on time for here. So I will cut this and whoops, went ahead there. And so next we have Paul coming up, and Paul Russell. So he's been working in risk management for a long time, and just how this all ties in. Again, we're looking at risk management, and as you'll see with this, business planning is just one part of risk management. And it's looking at, say it's whether it's your production risk or your financial risk, but just making sure that everything's in order. And so while these are often talked about as separate issues, they really are interrelated and really quite significant, again, especially in times of heightened risk, both for ourselves and businesses. So for a little background on Paul, he grew up on a potato farm in northern Maine, way up in Fort Fairfield, I learned, and he graduated from the University of Maine at Fort Kent. He worked at the USDA FSA, or the Farm Service Agency, for 34 years as a county director in southeastern Massachusetts. And southeastern Mass is known for its cranberries and its shellfish, where FSA was active in both industries. And I can say myself, I've heard a lot of good things about the work that was done then that is still being carried out now as well, especially even for helping Maine aquaculture specifically. And in retirement, Paul is still doing things like this out of the kindness of his heart, I suppose, and is continuing to work with farmers on risk management planning with University of Massachusetts, the University of Rhode Island, and the University of Vermont. And I'll turn it over to you, Paul.
All right. Yes, I am. My name is Paul Russell, and I do work with the University of Vermont and the University of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And Thomas Morosky, Jake Jacobs are a couple of my colleagues, and we basically do risk management education for all types of agriculture across New England. So if you jump to the next screen, Christian, the goal of our program is obviously to help growers understand good risk management planning and what crop insurance risk management tools are available to help them in their risk management plan. Go ahead, jump. Farming is risky, and shellfish growing is probably the riskiest of the risky businesses. So a couple of thoughts that I think growers need to have are: how much money are you willing to lose? How much money can you afford to lose? And do you have a plan to recover from a significant loss? In our case, we'd be talking about generally natural disasters. Go ahead, Christian. There are two management tools that Risk Management Agency, USDA Risk Management Agency, puts out. One is a risk management checklist. It's just a simple checklist that goes down through all, the 6 major categories of risk, and you can check off if you have addressed this risk or if it's a concern. The other one, Christian talked about it, and I'll talk about it again, is the SWOT analysis. It's just a simple cross. You write down all your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As Christian was saying, it's a great idea to sit down at least a couple times a year, maybe every month. Just do a quick SWOT analysis. I also would recommend that if you have family members in the business, have them do a SWOT analysis. If you have employees, let the employees do a SWOT analysis. It just kind of puts on paper thoughts that everyone has in their head, concerns or things that they're really proud of or are excited about. So you put it down on paper, and then you get a chance to, if you have things on the threat side or the risk, you can work on them. If you got things that are on the strength side, well, you take pride in it. Okay, let's jump to the next one. Now, in terms of risk management programs, USDA has 2 major agencies that have programs that can help growers. First one is the USDA Risk Management Agency. This is the agency that is in charge of developing crop insurance programs. Now, Risk Management Agency does not deliver the product. They create the product. Crop insurance is sold through private companies. So there's a partnership between USDA, Risk Management Agency, private companies that develop that take the policy, and then agents that sell it to the local farmers. Most crops in this country have a crop insurance policy. Going back to the 30s, we were talking a lot of commodities. The governments had programs. You could either participate in them and you got support, or you were on your own. But that was risk management from the 30s to probably the 80s. Starting in the 80s, there were a lot of ad hoc programs. If there was a disaster, Congress would appropriate money, farmers would come in the office, and money was divvied up that way. So it was always kind of a post-disaster strategy. But through that process, the federal government started instituting what they would call risk management programs. They wanted farmers to start developing their own risk management plans, and USDA would develop programs that farmers would have to buy into, and the farmer could buy levels of coverage they wanted to purchase, and obviously they would have to pay. So there would be buy-in from the farmer, that they would have records and they would have money in, skin in the game as they go into these programs. So Risk Management Agency is the main federal agency that deals with crop insurance. And currently they are working on a crop insurance policy for oysters. So I'll get into that in a few minutes. But, eventually the goal is to have all major commodities nationwide covered by crop insurance. Now, the Farm Service Agency is a very traditional USDA program. They manage most of the farm programs across the country. But they have one program, the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. This program is your public option for the crop insurance program. Any crop that's not covered by crop insurance, you can purchase coverage through the FSA office under the NAP program. They also have some loan programs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the loan programs, but when you're doing your risk management planning, credit is always one component of your business plan. And FSA does have some programs that, a lot of farmers nationwide use. And certainly aquaculture growers have looked at and probably are using some of these, like the Farm Storage Facility Loan Program. You could buy a refrigerated truck, you could buy storage facilities, whatever. The Farm Storage Facility Loan Program is available. And the other ones are the very traditional loan programs for operating loans or farm ownership loans or emergency loans. And again, it's, these are FSA programs. They were very successful in Cape Cod when the shellfish industry was really getting cranked up. A lot of credit was, most of the credit on the Cape came through the FSA office because the terms were, I'll say more generous in terms, traditional banks did not really want to get in the shellfish business, but they would take your house under a mortgage. But with the FSA office, because this was the deal with his crops, they would lend money. Say if it's a boat, they would take the boat as the collateral. If it was oyster seed, they would take the oyster seed as the collateral. And it gave the owner, the grower, some flexibility. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about it much more, but so we can jump to the next slide. All right, there are, right now in the Northeast, there are two policies that growers in Maine could use to insure their crop. Now, the Cultivated Clam project pilot is in Massachusetts. If there was a quahog grower in Maine, you could, through what's called a written agreement, probably get a clam policy. But the reason I want to talk about this clam policy is I would suspect that an oyster policy will be very similar to what you'll see in this clam policy. So I guess I'd like to prepare growers for the concept of an oyster crop insurance policy based off this cultivated clam policy. The whole farm revenue is just what it says. Here's a chance to insure your farm revenue against a loss. It's a different concept. Instead of looking at a yield-based policy where if you lose the crop, you get reimbursed. This one is if you lose income. So if you had multiple crops, you had 10 crops, and for some reason your income collapse, you could get some protection for your revenue. This was really designed for crops, for farms like in California or the Northeast that are very diverse, probably have a few crops that have crop insurance, but their main concern was protecting their revenue. Could you jump one more slide? Cultivated clams, it's a dollar-based coverage. So they take whatever number of clams you have times an established price and develop a dollar value. And then there's assumption that it's based on a 60% survival rate. So that's something that USDA has established. And the coverage starts from December 1st and ends November 30th. Next slide. Cultivated clams, like almost all the crop insurance programs, would protect you from decreased salinity, but disease, freeze, hurricane, ice flow, in the case of shellfish, oxygen depletion, storm surge, tidal wave. So any of those natural disasters thing about a jump one more slide. Uh-oh, I think we're frozen. Because this is a USDA product and they want farmers to participate, you can see the level of coverage that growers could purchase. You can go from 50% up to 75%. But look at the premium subsidies. At 50%, USDA is going to pick up 67% of the cost of that policy. And as the percentage goes up, as you accept less risk and let the crop insurance policy accept more of the risk, USDA tends to lower that premium. So, and this will be true in all the products, crop insurance products you see, is the lower the percent of coverage you get, obviously the less protection you have, the higher the subsidy. But the goal is they want farmers to participate in these programs, but they also want them to be actuarially sound. So for every dollar that is paid into the program, a dollar is paid out. Somewhere in that balance. So these, the prices are always changing as the risk changes over years. So it's an actuarially sound program, but USDA does supply a great deal of money to keep this thing affordable for farmers. You can always buy what is called a CAT policy, a catastrophic risk policy. That's 50% of your inventory at 55% of the price. And it's going to be the same over on the NAP, with the NAP program. All the crop insurance programs, there is there's what's called a CAT policy. It's generally, the CAT policy does not cost the grower a penny, but you do have to pay a $300 administrative fee to be in the program. So it's not, there is no premium, but you do have to pay that administrative fee. We jump to maybe the next slide. All right, now we're getting into whole farm revenue. This is a product that was put in the 2014 Farm Bill. There had been another product similar to it before that, but whole farm protection is, it's a new concept to try to get growers, especially growers with very diverse operations, especially a lot of direct market retail operations that have maybe higher value products, to ensure their income rather than the product, the yield, the crop. You can use whole farm with other insurance products, except for the catastrophic coverage under crop insurance. So you can use whole farm in conjunction with the FSA program, or you can use it with other crop insurance products. If there, eventually if there was an oyster policy, you could have both you could have both the oyster policy and the whole farm revenue. And if you have multiple policies, you do get a discount if you have more than one crop. So if you have 2 crops or 3 crops or more, There's a great, because there's less risk, USDA has a much higher subsidy for more diverse farms. But you can see you can buy coverage levels of from 50% up to 85% of your income. It's available in all counties, so it's available in all counties in Maine. And what they use is they look at your last 5-year history, from your Schedule F, tax history. And the premium subsidies go from 50% up to 80%. The lower the coverage you buy, the higher the subsidy. So it's the same as the clam policy. The lower the level of protection you have, the more USDA is putting into that policy. All right, can we jump to the next one? All right, this is how a whole farm works. FSA is, or not FSA, your crop insurance agent will look at your tax records for 5 years. Obviously, you haven't filed your taxes for 2020, so they're going to look at from 19 back to 15, develop an average income. It is skewed some, knowing that most farms, the income is growing each year. So it is skewed some towards the later years. So it's not a straight average. It's adjusted upward to accommodate for growth. You would also have to supply your expected 2021 revenue, and then you can insure based on the lesser of those two. So if you're a business that is starting to decline in sales and maybe you're looking to exit, you can't look backwards and use those higher years of income. You'd use your expected revenue. But generally for growing businesses, you're going to be looking at your historical income and revenue as your baseline operation. So then the grower would select the amount of adjusted gross revenue they want to insure. So you could go from just half your revenue up to 85% of your revenue. Now you go through the year, you grow your crops, you market them, you develop your income, and when you file, when you get ready at the end of the year to do your taxes, you can see, well, did my income fall? And if it fell, did it fall below that guarantee? Now, one little caveat I want to stick in here right now. When I say you had a loss of revenue, it does have to be tied to some natural disaster, some weather event. I think we were kind of shocked this year. We have a grower in Mass. It's more fruit direct market. He was concerned about COVID could really hurt his income, and he has a policy. Assuming that it was natural causes, that he would be covered, and the crop insurance folks said, it was their understanding he was not covered because that was not technically a natural disaster. It was a natural event, but not a natural disaster. So, I just want to put that if you look at whole farm revenue, make sure you talk to your agent about what events are covered and what may not be covered. Okay, can we jump to the next slide? Here's just a quick example. If you're a grower and your average income is $100,000, and you had 75% coverage, so your guarantee is $75,000. You only produce $30,000 in income, you've got a revenue loss of $45,000. So that is exactly what you would get from your whole farm revenue policy. They would pay you $45,000. So your income with whole farm would be $75,000. Your income without whole farm would be $30,000. I mean, this is a very simple example. It's a whole lot more complicated than that in terms of, especially for shellfish or commodities where you may have carryover inventory, because they would obviously have to adjust that loss for any excess carried over inventory. So if you normally carry over 1 million oysters and this year you're carrying over 2 million oysters, they've got to adjust that down because you have the product, but you haven't sold it yet. But this is just a very simple concept of how this whole policy works. All right, can we jump to the next? So these are crop insurance policies. Cultivated Clams, November 30th is the deadline to purchase a policy, and then for whole farm revenue, March 15th. So you could technically still get coverage for your 2021 crop. You could start now, or I mean, you get up till March 15th. Now, there are a lot of records required for whole farm revenue. You're going to have your 5 years of taxes. A lot of the records that Christian displayed in terms of, your trends, how many oysters have you been selling, where are your markets, etc. So it is record intensive to purchase a policy for whole farm policy. All right, can we jump to the next? Again, the whole farm revenue is sold by private crop insurance agents. There are crop insurance agents that service Maine. You can, if you go to USDA, you can find, where you can get a list of all the agents that are available. You might talk to some of your neighbors or other farmers to find out which agents have been active in your area, and or even your association. Maine Aquaculture probably will have a list of agents that have been active in your area. So, you can talk to the agents, or just give it some thought whether you want to purchase a crop insurance policy. It's also, if you go to the RMA website, they have a lot of tools that you can use to help you figure out how the policy will, the level of coverage you can get and what it would cost you at all the different levels. Or you can speak to one of the people involved with this grant that are working with crop insurance. So, well, that's it with federal crop insurance. Now let's go to the public programs. NAP, the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, as I said before, that's sold at your local USDA office. There is an office that covers every county in the country. In Maine, they have FSA offices along the coast, and they do have rates for most of the shellfish commodities. They may even have rates for kelp. If not, they should be working with Maine Aquaculture to develop rates and production numbers for kelp. So any crop that's not covered by crop insurance, you should be able to insure through the NAP program. NAP, gives you a level of coverage very similar to crop insurance against any weather-related losses, excluding wildlife. So it's very, very similar to crop insurance in terms of the losses. I know growers have used it for such things as, ice damage, wind, hurricanes, heat, all the anything that could be related to a weather event. Deoxification that happened a few years ago, once in Mass, over in the Duxbury area, killed, a lot of growers were affected because we had some just blistering heat for like a week with no wind. So it does provide some level of coverage for growers for any natural disaster or event. All right, can we jump to the next slide? Aquaculture crops, crustacean, fin, fish, mollusks. As I said, kelp and seaweed could be covered. I can't think of, are there any other crops? If there are, I would recommend that the Maine Aquaculture Association get in touch with FSA and start developing the rates and yields so that they could be covered under a NAP policy. Again, NAP is controlled by the Farm Service Agency, and the rates and prices are set by the State Farm Service Agency Committee and State Office, which is in Bangor. The policies, though, are managed by the local Farm Service Agency in the county. So there's a lot of control within the state in terms of how this program is set up. For shellfish, FSA has to set up mortality rates. So if you buy, if you lose shellfish at 2 millimeters, they will adjust it up to, what the potential for you to sell. You don't get compensated for 100% of your seed, but and it could be based off of the records the grower has on his mortality, or FSA establishes their own. If you don't have records, they will adjust it themselves. They also set all the prices for oysters. And so the price you insure in the state of Maine is specific to the state of Maine. So all the states have different prices for all the oysters or clams or mussels, etc. Next slide, please. So CAT coverage, catastrophic coverage, it's 50% of the guarantee. So if you have $100,000 in inventory, they take your oysters, convert it to dollars, you could insure $50,000, but it's at 55% of the FSA established price. So if you had a total loss, you might be able to recover 25 to 27% of that total loss under CAT, under the catastrophic coverage. Now, FSA does allow buy-up coverage. It's very similar to crop insurance. You can purchase 50% coverage at 100% of the price, up to 65% coverage at 100% of the price. The catastrophic coverage for beginning farmers is free for veterans, historically underserved producers, and limited resource producers. It's free. The buy-up options, the same groups, beginning farmers, veterans, etc., can buy it at half price. Next slide, please. So the catastrophic coverage is $325 per crop per county, maximum of 3 crops in a county. I believe it's $825 is the maximum you would pay if you had more than 3 crops. And again, beginning farmers, veterans, historically underserved, limited resource farmers, this fee is waived. This is an administrative fee. So it's, again, this policy would be free. Now the buy-up options, you're going to pay the administrative fee plus 5.25% of the dollars guaranteed. So if you had $100,000 in total inventory and you wanted to insure, you can insure up to $65,000. You would pay 5.25% of that $65,000. Again, it's half price for beginning farmers, veterans, historically underserved, or limited resource farmers. So it's discounted for those groups. All right, next slide. Deadline for aquaculture is September 30th, 2021 for crop year 2022. So for 2021, you cannot get the CAT NAP coverage now. You'd have to wait and do it for 2022. But again, I think it's a decent policy for the money. It's not going to make you whole, but a lot of growers think that if they could just recover their seed cost, they would be happy. So it's, when you win your risk management plan, just try to figure out how much coverage do you need, how much coverage do you want, how much money are you willing to risk? And this may be a product that you want to consider using. And with that, I think that's one more slide maybe. This is who we are. So this has been done through the University of Vermont. And that's my spiel. Am I on time?
You're good. Thanks, Paul. And for everyone who's not familiar with a lot of this work, I have to really commend Paul. He just took a lot of very, very complicated details and information and boiled it down quite well to just however long that was. And a lot of those details, I'll be glad to, as long as you're okay with Paul, to share this out, the recording, the slides and everything in there too, because he did a really good job boiling that down. And I'll stop the share here. One last thing, as I pull up another screen just briefly to share, if anyone has any questions or anything, you can either use the Q&A or the chat feature on the bottom and throw them in there, and we'll get to that in just a second. So I just want to show you one thing that we've been working on at MAA, very specific to what Paul's been talking about. And this first thing was looking at a Maine Aquaculture, the risk management. It's a 2-pager of infographics. And what this does is exactly what Paul was just talking about, is the second page actually, which unfortunately, I realize now I have the first page on here, but the second page shows the two of the programs Paul was just talking about, the Whole Farm Revenue Program and the NAP program, and gives some examples like Paul did about how they work and just some overall information about them, what's applicable, what's not. And this front side looks more at risk management and risk overall from a general perspective on the farm, looking at, say, marketing risk, these different types of risk, along with not only the factors of the risk themselves, but ways to manage or mitigate them. And the second thing we did is looking at, whoops, I'm clicking the wrong thing, Beginner's Guide to Risk Management. And so what we did here was make a series of decision trees within these same categories of risk, production, marketing, and all the others are on the back as well, which again, I only have the first page here. And these are available for free on our website. I'll put the link in the chat in just a second. But we did this for beginners specifically to help them, as we talked about earlier, set goals, determine your risk tolerance, identify risks, how to manage, mitigate them, and set up in a way it just asks you questions in these different categories. And then you go through and follow that decision tree down the little flow chart. And it helps you just it simplifies making a lot of these decisions and helps you identify different risks, successes, strategies in order to try to combat those. And we had a case study. This is very brief, just an idea of what this looks like in action. Say a mussel farm, for example, what are you going to look at in terms of your production risk? Say it's loss due to natural predators or disasters or predators. What are you going to do? And it seems kind of obvious when it's spelled out like this. You may get crop insurance, put up predator nets, multiple lease sites. And the same is true here for, say, marketing risk. You have to be able to sell consistently. So what do? You have a couple lease sites. So one is almost always harvestable, diverse set of suppliers, like we were talking about earlier, making sure you can sell to not only restaurants, but maybe to the local fish markets who may be up in sales, but different ways you can have your product out there. And that all ties back into this financial risk idea of having these consistent expenses, for example, could be an issue because you're not getting all your money coming in on time, or it's coming in sporadically because of COVID. And these cash flow projections you might have done could show you that you'll be okay, or maybe you built up a sufficient cash reserve through your business planning throughout a couple years. But this all comes back down to taking steps like building these business and production plans, and again here, multiple lease sites. And it's the same thing you see, say, with oysters and ice. For every type of farming, there's something just like this. And to wrap this all up, again, for any farmers especially, very willing to meet and provide these plans during a one-on-one meeting, go through all these resources and everything, and help get you set up with these production business plans. I will not write them or do them for you, but I'm glad to get you as close as I can and provide all the tools and answer any questions.